see the work, get more done, unlock more time, more money, and more freedom.
Join us as we explore the challenges and power of making work visible. Welcome to the Visible Workplace Podcast with Dr. Tom Raleigh.
Now, let's get into today's episode.
All right, welcome to today's episode. Excited to be here with you, and particularly about today's topic. We're going to talk about how to double the dopamine for you and your team. Now, this is a critical idea, and I want to give you an opportunity to reward yourself, reward your team frequently with lots of hits of dopamine. Now, for those of you who don't know, dopamine is a reward chemical and basically says, hey, you just did something good. Let's go and do more of that. But it can be hijacked. And certainly in our modern world, we've seen the consequences of that, where people get addicted to the wrong things. Now, in the old days before tech, this used to be substances, alcohol and cocaine and drugs, stuff like that. Sex, gambling. Humans have an amazing ability to get addicted to things because they're seeking dopamine. But in the modern age, we have found a highly seductive form of dopamine release. Unfortunately, it's not very productive. And so what we want to do is look at how do we replace some of the dopamine that's coming from social media, even though it's not doing too much, with rewards for getting the work done. And I want to talk to you today about an opportunity for you to essentially double the amount of dopamine. And for some businesses and some team members, it might be going from no dopamine to lots of dopamine with the right reward, which is getting stuff done. Thanks for joining me on today's episode of The Visible Workplace. And let's look at the problem when we don't get enough dopamine. So I'm at work, I'm working away, I'm doing things, I'm doing the work, but if I don't track it and I don't say, hey, I'm working on this right now, and now that's complete and it's done, then I miss out on a little drop of dopamine. But if I do track my work, I can go from, hey, this isn't started, and now I'm going to move it to working on, and I go do the work, and then I tick it over to done, and I'm like, great, that got done. Now, this should be reminiscent of most project management systems, either in a Kanban kind of style like Trello or Jira, where you move the card from, hey, haven't started, now I'm working on it, and now it's done, or in a spreadsheet style project management system where there's a little button and you click it from, hey, not started to working on to done. And those more advanced ones will commonly have different options for that button as well. It might be stuck, it might be scheduled, it might be waiting, it might be ready. There's other options in those more advanced ones. Obviously, if you try to do that in a Kanban, you're going to end up with a lot of columns, which is pretty difficult. But the overall idea that I want you to catch here is if we put work in these systems and we go from haven't started to working on, there's a small release of dopamine there. And then when I move from working on to done, there's another small release of dopamine. One of the problems though is if you have big projects, then you don't get much dopamine. You get one at the beginning, and let's say it's a 3-week project, and then you move it at the end to done. That's only really one dopamine at the beginning and one at the end, 3 weeks apart. It's hardly very rewarding. And compare that to, say, for instance, doom scrolling on Facebook or Snapchat or your social media of choice, Instagram. That gives little dopamine all the time. Microdopamine, microdopamine, microdopamine. To hit. And now we're going to go into a workplace that has a one every 3 weeks. It's just not that good. Now, this also may well be happening in the school system, that we just don't let our kids enough dopamine to say, hey, you did this. You started this, you completed. You started, you completed. And so what can we do? Well, one of the things is to move over to tracking the processes. And often you will find that there's processes that multiple events have to happen to complete the final outcome. So I might have 4, 5, 6, 8 steps, and each of those can be tracked with a move from not started to working on to done. And now we're looking at 16 dopamine events instead of just one. And that might seem really good, but if all you're tracking is the processes, then you'll lose visibility on what you're actually trying to create. And then you run into problems like, well, where is that file? I can't find it. And in a business that's been around for a while, or an enterprise that's been going for a while, you may well find that many of your files are spread all over the place and named very similarly. It's quite easy, unless you have a set way of naming things, to end up with multiple very similar names. You go type search and 182 events come up. 182 files come up. You're like, oh man, how do I find that file? And if we don't have a consistent naming system, then even typing in the name or whatever the identifier is, it might bring up a whole bunch of other files around that topic, or it might bring up nothing. So if we just track the processes, then yes, there might well be a lot more dopamine, which is a good thing because it rewards me for doing work, for getting stuff done, which is what we want, but we lose the results. So this is a very interesting idea. How do we solve this? Because we are up against it. The society that we have created with this tech world is extraordinary. So I remember chatting to one of my friends probably even 8 or 10 years ago. The iPhone had just come out and he's like, check this thing out. This is the most amazing tool because it gives me so much power, so much resources, so much information. And yet it has also caused a lot of problems. And that's before AI arrived. But you could argue that in the palm of our hands with our phones, we have more capacity to get stuff done, and yet we are not. Why? This could be that we're just not getting enough dopamine for the right things. We've essentially hijacked our minds to reward us for consumption of information and not productively getting stuff done. Now, this wouldn't be such a problem if we didn't have any problems, but looking around, we've got a few problems in the world. So, I've had some training on this, and what was interesting to me was, well, how do I double the amount of dopamine? And I found that I had done it by using the magic board. Now, for those of you who've been listening along, you'll know that a magic board basically brings the processes and the procedures and the results that we're creating onto one page. It's like, hey, if I do these things, I get those things. And if we track them all, then we get the opportunity for this double dopamine. There's a lot of other advantages of having a consistent structure for how we track the work. But if we're looking to reward ourselves and get our team reward for completing things and getting them done, then the ability to not only track our procedures getting done, but also track our results getting done, opens up the potential for a double dopamine hit. And notice that this is around doing the right things. Right being, hey, if I want to have these outcomes and have these results get done, then I need to reward myself for doing the work that gets me those things. So this is powerful. Not only are we tracking what gets done and moving from not started to working on to done, but also the results themselves. Now, sometimes you're going to have magic boards that have a lot of processes and a few results. Guess what? Double dopamine, both for the lot of processes, but also the results. And sometimes you'll find there's only a few processes and they create a lot of results. Again, we're getting double dopamine. In fact, both of those structures, one has a lot of reward at the top for the creation of the results that we want, and the other has a few rewards at the top, but a lot of rewards around the results. Once again, we are getting a lot of dopamine. We're basically retraining ourselves to say, hey, go do these things. They are the right things, and here's a reward. And up against doom scrolling, we go click, 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 but nothing's getting done. We actually have a chance. So this needs structure. This needs an ability to do it. And that structure is the Magic Board structure. One of the columns is called status. And it allows you and your team to go from, hey, I'm not started, to working on to done, as well as all of those other options that particularly the ready one is really useful in the results. When I'm working on a file and then I need to pass it to one of my team members and they work on it, and then sometimes they'll pass it back to me and I'll work on it. And that ready to working, once again, it's a dopamine hit. So I'm getting rewarded for completion of results. Even if the final result isn't done, we're still getting a reward. Now, I actually took some aggressive steps, let's call them, to look at this problem and go, hang on, where am I doing this? And so I took the somewhat radical step to delete social media from my phone. Still on my computer, but the reward system is nowhere near as strong. Now, other people have done this and it's fine, digital detox, but I also noticed that I was getting rewards, false rewards from email. Now, email I would read on my phone, but very rarely reply. Sometimes I do like data management or email clearing, not a good use of my time, and far more effective on a computer. And so these two steps have been quite revolutionary. And then when I combine it with the Magic Board double dopamine release, actually getting a lot more done. The last one to notice is it can all be sped up. How? Well, you probably know that we're in the middle of an AI revolution. And I ran a test last week. I was like, okay, what I'm going to do is go through a Magic Board that was set up to create an offer. Here's a bunch of steps that were required to create that offer. I went through, did the work, and it took me 24 minutes. I timed it. I was like, how long is this going to take? And then I looked at the prompts. I looked at what was required to create that offer, dropped it into a Magic Board, did the working on and did the done for the prompt. It was done in 90 seconds, and I got another dose of dopamine, not in 24 minutes, but instead in 90 seconds. So I think this is going to be very, very powerful, that we are going to be able to essentially hijack the dopamine system with AI in a really powerful and quick way. So I'm excited for that. We're moving on that over the next 4 weeks to dev. We're probably sprint 12 at this point. Sprint 11, we've got a couple of little technical debt pieces to pick up, but through mid-September to mid-October, dropping in the AI, literally have the prompt, click the button, it goes out to the API. That's the target. Don't know whether it's possible. Don't know whether it's going to work, but I am hopeful. If it doesn't work, fine. I'm stuck cutting and pasting prompts. That's not a big deal. But what I want you to catch here is that the speed of dopamine release for getting the work done will be sped up with AI as long as you are tracking how you do things and what you're creating. If you want some help with this, if you'd like to try out the software and you want to go do it yourself kind of option, then head over to www.magicboards.io. If you want to have a consultant go through and build this out for you, get your team, get yourself up and running so that you can not only track your work and see what's going on, but double the dopamine that your team and yourself are receiving for doing the right things, then reach out to me at tom@systemio.dev. That is my email. Geez, just had a little moment of blankness there. Pretty funny. Or on LinkedIn, you can look me up, Dr. Tom Rowley. Thanks for tuning in today. I hope you got a lot of value out of this. This is something to look at. When you combine tracking the steps, the instructions, the procedures, the SOPs, whatever you want to call them, and tracking the results on the same page in a magic board structure, doubles your dopamine, rewards you and your team for doing the right work so that you can get more leverage, make more money, and have more time back in your life. Thanks for tuning in today. It's been a pleasure. Hope you got a lot of value. See you next time.
Thanks for tuning into the Visible Workplace Podcast. Subscribe for more productivity tips and share with friends. We love your feedback, so please rate and review us on your favorite podcast platform. For more tips and tools, visit www.magicboards.io. Thanks again, and see you next episode. Disclaimer: the information and ideas discussed in this episode are general in nature and do not take into account your specific circumstances. You should seek specialist advice for any medical, financial, emotional, mental, or other difficulties that you are facing with appropriate specialists and professionals so that they can apply your specific circumstances and give you the required advice.